Morning, everybody, to a very brief but very important Board of Supervisors meeting, and we'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with passion. Thank you. All right, so we just have one item on the agenda this morning, the emergency proclamation, and I assume Sheriff Hansel, you could come up and let us know about the details of this, and in particular, what the community might be able to expect in terms of resources. Thank you.
Good morning. Sheriff Billy Hansel, also the Director of Office of Emergency Services. Ryan Derby, the OES manager, is on his way up. As you know, the last month has been pretty busy here in Humboldt County. Not only do we have our earthquakes, but now we had our winter storms, and this is our second declared disaster within that month. January 3rd, we saw a significant amount of rain and wind that impacted infrastructure throughout the county, as well as downed trees, culverts, washed out roadways, mudslides, damage to utilities. We had widespread power outages. All that affected everyone within Humboldt County. And knowing how resilient we are, knowing how well we work together, we did our part to try and bridge those issues within our community, and a lot of people helping each other out. One of the things that we can do, and what we did do, is last week I declared a local emergency, which basically opens up a request through the state and potentially federal government for funding for some of those trackable expenses that we have, as well as reimbursement for storm damages for our county and city and municipalities, so they can recover and seek funding sources for that recovery. And so part of that process is our initial damage assessments that we have to submit to the county or to the state, and as long as it reaches a threshold, then the state is able to come in and assist us. So I'd like our Office of Emergency Services Manager Ryan Derby to talk about our initial damage assessments and what's the next steps.
And very quickly, I just want to let everybody know that we do have all five of us here. Supervisor Bohn and Supervisor Bushnell have joined us in Zoom, so just to let you know.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, members of the board, Sheriff. So far, we've received initial damage estimates largely from County Public Works. We're looking at a little over $3 million in damages to public roadways, and over the course of the last few days, and the big focus for today is getting those initial damage estimates from our other jurisdictions. The hope with that is to meet the threshold to get Humboldt County included on the major disaster declaration from the federal government, and that's largely going to be public assistance for Category B, emergency protective measures, roads, and public infrastructure. So we're going to be pushing really hard to get those initial damage estimates from the cities and the community service districts today, get those uploaded, and we are hoping to have that completed by end of day today. We're working really closely with the Cal OES recovery team and have about 4 of them down in our emergency operations center today walking us through this process, as well as a representative from Region 2 Response from Cal OES. They've been extremely helpful. And I know at this point we're getting initial damage estimates still from the earthquake, so it's just parsing out what was storm related, what was earthquake related, and making sure that we're tracking those for the appropriate disaster numbers. That's really all I have. It's my first day back after a couple days off, so I'm largely playing catch up today.
Being tested by fire, quakes, and everything else lately, aren't we? Yes.
That's right. He really didn't have any time off because we were still bugging him over the weekend. But it did. These storms do have that federal declaration attachment because of all the widespread damage throughout the whole state. and the governor was quick to declare a state of emergency and a disaster declaration as well. So this is one of those things that we definitely want to make sure that we track our expenses appropriately, and then also provide information to the public as far as how they can, seek assistance and those kind of things.
So is it likely that the private sector will be able to get any financial assistance? I know some people had their homes destroyed, trailers destroyed, a lot of cleanup and debris to be dealt with. What's the background there?
So at this point, it's unclear whether the storms will receive what's called IA or individual assistance through FEMA. That's a federal program that we have to qualify for, and we are tracking those damages, but there's a threshold for SBA, or the Small Business Association, of 25 homes at 40% damage or more. And thus far, we haven't reached that 25 home threshold for SBA. And IA, or individual assistance, is going to be a similar or higher threshold. When we had the earthquake response, it was somewhere in the ballpark of $65 million for a federal declaration. And because we have 16 counties in coastal region that are part of this state emergency, we will qualify for a federal declaration, but individual assistance is unclear at this point. So we're going to be pushing for it and asking the appropriate questions, but at this point, we don't have any insight into it.
Okay. Any other board members have any questions, please? Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you. So I've been contacted by a couple of residents who live in the Elk River watershed who experience significant flooding and I'm sure other supervisors have areas in their districts. I know the Elk River is not in mine, but I've heard from folks anyway. So is there any opportunity to address sedimentation that leads to, I know that we have a lot of suspended sediment that's been mobilized through this flooding and then has been deposited in watersheds that already have a lot of flooding problems. Is there any opportunity to address that through sediment removal, channel excavation, any of that through emergency funds, or are there other ways that we could work on that?
Yeah, so for projects like that, mitigation would probably be the better tactic to take. We do have a hazard mitigation plan, which is approved. We just need to get AB 2140 compliance, which we're working on with Planning and Building Department. As far as an emergency response goes, that's more of a mitigation or recovery action. So I don't think that we could use the current emergency to address those issues, but it's certainly something that we could prioritize as a project down the road for broader resilience and protection of those properties in the watershed.
Supervisor Wilson? Good, okay. Supervisor Bohn, I see your hand up, as well as Supervisor Bushnell next.
Yeah, and just so you know, and I think most of us are aware, Elk River has been going through a 15-year study phase of what they can and can't do. I met with the Water Board just last week on this, and they're about ready to do another study so they can actually do something to clean the channel or do whatever. This is historical flooding. I was out there a few times during this, and at Dead Woman's Curve and at Berta Road, it's historical flooding. There wasn't any new flooding. So I know some of the newer people get kind of, they get shown their houses in July and don't realize that this happens in January. We got all the way up, I think, to the second board this year at Berta. So Supervisor, I've got reams of paperwork on studies of Elk River. We just have to get them all to agree to do something.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. Good morning, Sheriff and Ryan. My question is for residents that want to report personal damage. What would be the path for that?
Good.
Thank you, Supervisor Bushnell. So for most emergencies, we put a link up on our humboldtsheriff.org/emergencies page. At this point, I don't think we have one for the storms, but we can make sure that gets put up today so we can start receiving those residential reports and tracking them.
Thank you. And just for clarification, it is important that people do that?
It is important that people submit those damage claims, but there has to be the caveat that that's not an application for assistance. It's largely for us to start tracking residential and private property damage so we can meet those thresholds. And ideally, there's a feedback loop that happens if we do qualify for SBA or a major disaster designation with individual assistance. But submitting those claims doesn't provide any mechanism for relief through the county. It's largely a tracking mechanism that we use to submit to the state.
Thank you for that clarification. Also, for myself and possibly my other board members, when that link is up, can you email that to me?
Absolutely. We'll get that out shortly.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Bushnell. And again, that was humboldtsheriff.org, and there'll be a page for storms that will be put up. Right now, there is a page for earthquakes, I believe. Thank you for that. And Supervisor Bohn, I see your hand again.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there any reason we wouldn't use the 441-5000 number, since aren't we housing all this in one place, Ryan? Or could we pivot enough to do both at the same phone number for information?
Absolutely. So people can either call 441-5000 or 268-2500 for information on the emergencies. But as far as tracking damage goes, that link is going to be the best path forward.
No, understood, but they can still, I think and I may have misunderstood, but I think a lot of people need to be walked through this. And I think, and I've heard some great things on the 441-5000 number, both and storm related and earthquake, because I've been sending quite a few people there. So thank you.
Absolutely. And to our benefit, we have the Recovery Operations Center active at a level 2, and we're utilizing the same staff for the Storm Emergency Operations Center. So everyone should be up to speed on all the talking points and be able to address any questions that come through either of those phone numbers.
That's great. Any other supervisor questions, thoughts, comments? Sure nice to get the break in weather the last couple days. We've got one more storm coming tomorrow, it looks like, and then high pressure building in. So there's a little reprieve for everybody to clean up and assess. And of course, after all this settles down, we'll have a debriefing with OES on what we learned from this series of emergencies. And all of that good stuff. So, and I've had some great conversations with OES Director Ryan Derby in regards to some of the lessons learned were backup generators, for instance, for small community water systems like Big Lagoon, Patrick's Point, and even Oric. And I think, as Director Derby said, there are some funds possibly through the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program for the unincorporated areas that may be of use. And Humboldt Area Foundation also chimed in and said that they would be willing to try and help provide the matching funds for that. So like any emergency, there's a lot of lessons learned, and I look forward to that debriefing. And thank you for all you've been doing, Director Derby and Sheriff Hansel and all of your staff. This has tested us all once again, but here we are coming back. Yes, please, Sheriff Hansel.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Madrone. I really appreciate you bringing that up. You know, we have to prepare for the next disaster now. And so we've beaten this drum over and over again over the last couple of years. And so we really want to just remind people, just prepare for that local emergency, prepare for their emergency at their homes and at their businesses. And a great resource is ready.gov. Ready.gov is a great resource, and you can prepare your home, an evacuation plan, what to pack, what to bring, what happens when. You can have all those things kind of planned out. I know we're kind of learning through trial and error here of what we need based upon the last couple of years, but realistically, we need to be resilient here, more resilient, and learn from our lessons here. And how can we sustain that next one? Because that next one is coming, whatever that next one is. And so the better we're prepared, the more we can help our neighbors, our friends, and our community if we're prepared for that next one. So we're definitely going to do that.
Absolutely.
Can I make a motion to accept staff's recommendation?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and we'll go ahead and go to public comment first. We'll go to the folks in Zoom. I see there's only one, and if you do wish to speak, you should know that you should turn off your audio if you're trying to watch the video because there's a delay. If you do want to speak, you should press *9 now in order to raise your hand. I'll give that a few seconds here to see if that's of interest to the person in Zoom. Thank you for joining us. And then after that, we'll go to those here in the audience. I'm not seeing a hand come up there. we'll go ahead and go to those in the audience, and if the hand does come up, we'll come back there. Please give us your name and share with us your thoughts.
Steve Davis, resident at 901 Birch Avenue in Louisville.
Sorry, Steve. Go ahead, Sheriff Hansel. I think that he may have to sit at your spot because these mics have not been working lately. So,
I've got a theater speaking voice. No.
Steve, speak into this mic here, please.
Thank you.
Have a seat.
Okay.
Thank you, Sheriff Hansel. Technology. It's always something.
I am
There you are.
Steve Davis, a resident at 901 Birch Avenue in McKinleyville, California. Thank you, Chair, Supervisor of our Humboldt County, Steve Madrone, Vice Chair, Rex Bohn, Supervisor Natalie Arroyo, Supervisor Mike Wilson, and Supervisor Michelle Bushnell, who is representing those in our Rio Del, if I'm correct on this, our hearts and minds and hopes and plans go especially to those who have been red tagged or yellow tagged at their houses, that we can find emergency housing for these long-term friends or recent people. I love Rio Del. I know there's excellent Section 8 housing that's recently been built there, and a close friend, I've driven her from McKinleyville back to Rio Del so she could have a warm, dry shelter, a place to get a good rest, cook food, and continue her art and music and grace us in Humboldt County. However, you have significant emergencies happening every moment of every hour of every day, especially at the emergency room at the Mad River Community Hospital, where I was there recently, wheelchaired in from my primary care provider's office right there at the Mad River Community campus, and I had to get back on my 2 feet and exit quickly because there were more people in the waiting room, that I didn't have the opportunity to have a good meal and talk with my physician in control. So, Supervisor Mike Wilson, I'm fulfilling the word of my promise. Please support our community hospitals so they are more prepared for emergencies and people get the service they need. We can save lives, save properties, and work together as best we can in Humboldt County. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Anybody else here in the audience today that would like to speak to this item, the one item that we have on our agenda? Seeing none and seeing no hand up on Zoom, we have a motion and we have a second. Could we do a roll call, please?
Yes, we'll start with Supervisor Bohn,
First, yes,
Supervisor
I
Bushnell,
keep track now.
Supervisor Bushnell,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo,
Yes.
and Supervisor Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. And the other day, I neglected to say that we were closing our meeting in honor of Dave Silverbrand. It was brought up earlier in the meeting, but I just wanted to once again honor Dave for his incredible work as far more than a news reporter. I think we would all agree here in Humboldt County. And today's meeting, I would like to close in honor of Martin Luther King, who we celebrated yesterday. And so with that, I believe we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.